What's up, party people? Today, I'm talking about this book right here, C.S. Lewis's The Abolition of Man. And after reading this, I am quite convinced that this is one of the most important books of our time, because in it, C.S. Lewis makes a defense of objective moral values. And he doesn't make a claim to any specific religion or historical set of beliefs, but rather a cumulative set of beliefs that originate from every religious and cultural tradition. And in the appendix, he actually gives a list of what he believes are those commonly held objective moral values. So this is super important in the age of relativism, wokeness, and scientism. So yeah, and it's not too long, 110 pages. So you could probably find a PDF online and read it in a day. So yeah, important book here. I'm going to try to explain it to you. The main thrust of the argument anyways. So the reason that he ends up writing this book, and sorry, I've got notes here that I'm going to be referring to because I don't want to butcher it too badly. Anyways, he gets down to writing this book because he receives this textbook in the mail, and he doesn't want to name drop the authors, so he gives it the name The Green Book. I believe actually people have found out posthumously what the book was that he was referring to. Anyways, it's some literature textbook, and he's kind of mad or infuriated by the fact that there's this trend in his day, anyways, and which has continued into our day much more strongly. But he saw the beginnings of this intuition to prevent students from making objective moral statements about art and about literature in general, right? So one of the examples he gives is that the authors of the Green Book don't want their students to say that waterfall is beautiful, because then they are putting an objective moral statement on the waterfall. The waterfall is beautiful. It's an essence that it has. It's objective. It really is beautiful. And if you don't think it's beautiful, you're wrong, right? The authors of the Green Book don't like this. Instead, they want the person to say, well, when I look at that waterfall, it makes me feel beautiful feelings, or I have beautiful feelings toward this waterfall. But it's in the person, their opinion. It's not objective and existing out in the real world. And he says he uses this just as like a springboard for like the larger defense of moral values. And so it goes beyond literature and art, of course. But his main point is that debunking traditional values is not productive for humanity, right? So he and he kind of picks at the authors of the Green Book because they almost come across as like snarky and like arrogant, because they're like, well, we're seeing through the traditional moral values, like we are getting at something more fundamental, when in reality the traditional moral values are what enable you to see in the first place, right? By see, he means like actually like make objective statements about the world, right? If you get rid of these traditional moral standards and values, you can't really see anything, right? You can't say or do anything. So this system of moral values, he gives a unique name to, and he calls it the Tao. And I found that interesting because I think the term Tao originates in like Eastern thought. So I'm curious why he chose that term. Anyways, I think it translates roughly to the way, and I don't know, that's kind of cool. And in the appendix of the book, he gives kind of like a summary of what he believes the Tao to be. And there's a little preface to the appendix where he's saying that I don't think that I'm complete in my list. But he gives I have no doubt that he gets the main points here. So I'll just list off some of the ones that he lists in the back of the book. So one of the laws of the Tao is the law of general beneficence. So like, being generally good to like the human race in general, right? So like don't kill people, don't bring misery upon them, treat others as you want to be treated, right? So there's a positive and a negative sense to that law. Secondly, he talks about the law of special beneficence. So like not just like general feelings of goodwill, but like being good to specific people, like your brothers, your parents, your children, your spouse, your country, right? Like these specific instances of goodwill. And then the next one here is number 3, duties to parents, elders, and ancestors. kind of similar to the previous one, I suppose. He doesn't provide his own summary on each of these. He just kind of gives quotes from different traditions to support them. So he's not partial. He is a Christian, but he's not partial to Christianity in this book. He doesn't make any appeals to, doesn't quote any scripture. It's all sort of based in like his own reasoning, which is good, because I think it appeals to everybody. Even if you aren't a Christian, you still have to obey the Tao and these objective moral statements. So then the next one is number 4, duties to children and posterity. Posterity meaning future generations, right? Then number 5, the law of justice. So he talks about sexual justice and honesty, and then justice in court. And then he also, law number 6, the law of good faith and veracity, right? So like kind of similar to honesty, right? Not deceiving anybody. Law number 7, the law of mercy, right? So people that are less privileged than you, the weak and the sick, the hungry, the poor, right? And then he says law number 8, the law of magnanimity. And he has 3 types, which he doesn't list what the differences are. Kind of leaves it up to the reader to figure it out. Now, I thought magnanimity meant generosity, but I think he means it in a broader sense in this book, more to mean like general goodwill and like going out of your way to like make sure that people are okay and that you do the right thing, which are, I know I'm saying nebulous terms here, but that's what it seems to me anyways. Yeah. And then those are the 8, I think, 8 laws that he lists anyways for the Tao. So that's pretty cool. It's good that he included that appendix to sort of solidify what he was talking about. I think the view in the book might have been a bit impoverished if he hadn't included the appendix, so kind of wise on his part there. So you may be asking, why is the Tao necessary, right? And so Lewis argues that the Tao is necessary because it defines and sustains humanity, and it's actually core and fundamental to human nature. And without it, if we try to deny it or get rid of it, humanity is plunged into both slavery and self-annihilation. And so I will try to show that as we continue. So just had a quote on page 86 about the Tao being core to human nature. Lewis writes, in the Tao itself, as long as we remain within it, we find the concrete reality in which to participate is to be truly human, the real common will and common reason of humanity, alive and growing like a tree, and branching out as the situation varies into ever new beauties and dignities of application. So yeah, to be within the Tao, to be obeying these like traditional moral value statements, is to be truly human, right? It's core to human nature and humanity itself. And if we treat it as a mere phenomena and not truth, we deny it and we get rid of it. So there's another quote here on page 60 that has to do with that. And it says, but wherever any precept of traditional morality is simply challenged to produce its credentials, so this is like from the perspective of the rationalists, right? Well, these traditional moral values don't make sense, so we're going to ask them, why do you exist? That's what Lewis is arguing against, right? Wherever any precept of traditional morality is simply challenged to produce its credentials, as though the burden of proof lay on it, we have taken the wrong position. So he's saying you cannot just like ask why the traditional moral values exist, because they're first principles. They just are, and they don't require any proof, right? They just exist. So the 2 ways that I see, anyways, I'm not reading this in the book, but the 2 ways that I see this playing out in like modern society are the scientists and the relativists. And when I say scientists, I mean the people that follow scientism, not the people that, I mean, there are good Christian scientists that are doing real science, right? But the scientists, scientisms, whatever you want to call them, they are perpetuating this anti-Tao sentiment because they are materialists, okay? So they don't believe that humans have any sort of spiritual quality or any quality beyond the physical, and so they don't understand how they just deny the existence of the Tao, right? It's like this ethereal, unprovable, unmeasurable laws, like this. What is that? Like they just deny the existence outright. And then you have other people that are the relativists is what I call them. They see that humans are spiritual beings. They acknowledge that humans are not purely physical. So the Tao, for them, exists potentially, but they reject its authority. So These are people that maybe are woke or new age, who recognize man as spiritual, but they reject traditional values in spite of that. So those are the two types of people that I see kind of perpetuating this anti-Tao sentiment in modern society. Anyways, without the Tao, things lose their like correct spiritual quality. And for the scientists anyways, they become mere nature, okay? So if humans don't have spiritual quality, or they don't have souls, they become pure nature. And that's the word Lewis uses in the book. And since we can no longer make objective moral statements about things, we cannot even argue for the posterity or the continuation of the species, right? So one example would be like killing a baby. Like, everyone knows that's wrong, like intuitively. But without the Tao, without these traditional objective moral statements, you actually can't say that. Because to say that would be to make an objective moral claim. And on what grounds are you doing that, right? You feel that it's intuitively wrong, but actually the authority that you have to say that comes from the Tao, right? It's sort of similar to the is-ought problem. You can never get an ought from an is, right? So you can say a baby died. And if somebody is a scientist and doesn't believe in souls or objective moral statements or anything like that, they cannot say that's good or bad. It just is, right? You can't derive an ought from that. Whereas people that are within the Tao can say, yes, that's actually a bad thing. So the Tao is necessary, right, to make those objective moral statements. So without the Tao, without things that are good that we have as humans to work towards, what motivates human behavior, right? Like, what is there left to work for? Why are we living? And if you don't have the Tao and these transcendental values to orient yourself towards, there is nothing left beyond the will. The individual, and this is sort of tying into like Nietzsche, right? Like the will to power, like the strong, the Übermensch, like the individual who does whatever he wants, right? So if we don't have the Tao, we don't have objective good, then we really just have the will to orient ourselves. And the irony that Lewis points out is, well, what determines our individual will? Is it chance? Nature? Right? Kind of both of these things, right? And so as humans sort of seek to dominate nature, we actually become subject to it because we have no way of saying anything else, right? So there are some quotes I'd like to point out. So page 72, it says, "Human nature will be the last part of nature to surrender to man. The battle will be won. Then we shall have taken the thread of life out of the hand of Clotho, and be henceforth free to make our species whatever we wish it to be. The battle will indeed be won, but who precisely will have won it?" And then also on page 84, Lewis writes, "The real objection is that if man chooses to treat himself as raw material he will be. Not raw material to be manipulated, as he fondly imagined, by himself, but by mere appetite, that is, mere nature, in the persons of his dehumanized conditioners." So the conditioners is the name to the people that Lewis gives. So my grammar was all messed up there. The conditioners is the name that Lewis gives to those people who hold the power to exert their own will, right? So in order for humans, the ones that reject the Tao, to fulfill their will, they need science and technology to do so, right? So, for example, I can't travel to Spain whenever I want because I just want to, if I don't have an airplane, right? You need an airplane, you need jet fuel, you need these things to make your will happen. And so when these conditioners, as Lewis calls them, finally reach the pinnacle of humanity, the last bit of nature to be dominated, the hardest part is human nature, right? Like psychology and eugenics and DNA and things like that. Once these conditioners obtain that kind of strong technology, then they are the only ones that possess it, right? So it's not like everybody can exert their will whenever they want. Really, there'll be like an elect few who hold this power over everybody else. And so you have the conditioners, who are the very few, the elect. Then you have the conditioned, which are the people that have those the will imposed upon them, as opposed to them exerting their own will, right? And so that is where the slavery piece comes in, right? Because I said at the beginning that without the Tao, we're plunged into slavery and self-annihilation. Well, slavery is for almost everybody the case, right? Because not everybody possesses the technology to exert their own will, only the elect few. So, and as these conditioners continue to mold human nature to their own will, right, not towards the objective good because they've rejected the Tao. Instead, they mold human nature as they see or fit, as they will, right? They certainly do not hold posterity in mind, right? Because posterity, the good of future generations, is a Tao-based value judgment. So they cannot make that judgment. And so if they're completely outside the Tao, then they're only exerting their own will all the time. And maybe the humanity will not end in one generation of people being purely... Of the conditioners anyways, being purely self-serving. But after several generations, undoubtedly the end of humanity will come because it takes resources, right, to exert your own will, right? If I want to fly to Spain every 5 days and then fly back to Hawaii or whatever, you're using up energy and resources and things like this. And if you have enough people that are trying to exert their will this way and not think about future generations or their own lives, even like in 20 years, then undoubtedly the end of humanity will come, right? And so not only are most people in slavery, having their will, another person's will imposed upon them, but also you will have the end of humanity. And so this is all very dark and dreary stuff. What are some ways that we can move forward? And Lewis doesn't really, at least I didn't see him suggesting too strongly. He didn't dedicate a section anyways to suggesting certain things to move forward. These are things that I'm sort of reading out of the text. But the solution at the end of the day is to not reject the Tao, right? We read earlier that you cannot ask it to produce its credentials, right? It is a first principle, it just is. And so convincing people to respect the Tao and to accept it is the first step, right? So I have another quote similar to the one about the credentials. It's on page 61-ish. So it says, the direct frontal attack against the Tao, why? What good does it do? Who said so? Is never permissible, not because it is harsh or offensive, but because no values at all can justify themselves on that level. If you persist in that kind of trial, you will destroy all values, and so destroy the basis of your own criticism as well as the thing criticized. You must not hold a pistol to the head of the Tao. So yeah, convincing people to respect the Tao is the first step. One way we can do this is to redesign our education system to instruct future generations about the Tao and conform themselves to it, right? The thing like the Green Book that Lewis received in the mail that tells students they can't make objective statements about things in the world like waterfalls are a really bad first step for instructing people, right? The subheading of the book actually is How Education Develops Man's Sense of Morality, right at the bottom, right? So we actually need to be passed on these teachings, these ancient words of wisdom about the Tao, or else we are lost and we only have our own wills to exert our own power over other people, right? Another thing that we can do, to summarize the first point, is to teach people to respect the Tao, and education is important, right? So not to get our young people that are in school off the track by teaching them that the Tao doesn't exist, right? So getting our education system in line. Now, the second thing would be to only pursue or produce science and technology that respects and amplifies human nature rather than trying to dominate human nature, right? And Lewis does actually mention this one in his book, and then he recognizes right after he says it that it's like, I think I may be asking for too much. I'm not even sure this is possible, right? Like, once you kind of have this scientific attitude towards humanity and towards nature, it kind of like is an inevitable march towards the loss of human nature, the loss of the Tao. So he recognizes that this might not be possible. And then the last thing that I think is, it's very similar, right? So not only trying to the first thing I said anyways, and that's trying to change the culture. And so not only should we try to reform our educational systems to be more respectful and cognizant of the Tao, but also trying to just almost like a spread the gospel type of thing, right? Like expose the scientists and the relativists for their folly, and then try to help people return to this traditional morality. So, and I think Lewis's book is a great start. Maybe it's fairly accessible. Is it accessible to mainstream American audiences? Maybe not. It's a little bit too scholarly. So I don't know. Like, I think more people should read this book. He also has a fictionalized account of it called That Hideous Strength, his third installment in the Space Trilogy. I haven't read that in a while. I definitely will soon. It was very good the first time I read it. I don't think I fully understood the implications the first time, but I think I would appreciate it better the second time around. But yeah, more people should read this book and understand what Lewis is arguing, because yeah, I mean, this is like the story of our time, right? Things Gen Z always says, Gen Z and millennials are always saying, well, society's getting worse, everything's falling apart. Why? How did we get here? Lewis has an answer in this book. And so I think that his line of reasoning is super important to understand, and you should try to tell people about it, because once you realize where Lewis is coming from and what he's saying is true, yeah, I mean, it helps explain everything. So, yeah, really good. So, thank you, Mr. Lewis. I will definitely be revisiting this. And, yeah, that's all. So, leave any questions in the comments, and I'll see you next time.